He had not said a woman's name out loud, in the way you say someone's name when you mean it, when it carries weight, in 6 years. But there he stood on the front steps of a restaurant he had driven past twice before, finally pulling into the lot, his jacket collar turned up, against the October wind off Lake Ontario, one hand flat against the cold glass of the door. He knew almost nothing about her. Her name was June. His coworker Pete had given him that much, and not much more. "She's good people," Pete had said. "That's all you need to know, honestly." Soren had spent the next 5 days telling himself it wasn't a date. His 8-year-old son had spent the same 5 days telling everyone else it was. The morning had started the way every morning started. Every morning started with the sound of Noah padding down the hallway in socks that were too big for him, dragging slightly on the hardwood, and the smell of whatever Soren had left in the coffee maker the night before, which was never quite as good reheated, but which he drank anyway, because Noah was already at the table asking questions, and there was no time to be particular about coffee. Noah had found out the same way. He found out most things. He was 8 and relentlessly observant, and relentlessly observant, and had the particular gift of appearing to be completely absorbed in something else while actually absorbing everything in the room. Soren had taken the call from Pete in the kitchen, while Noah was supposedly spilled something complicated out of cardboard tubes at the table. By the time he hung up, Noah was watching him with an expression that was all contained excitement, and no attempt to hide it. "You're going somewhere," Noah said. It wasn't a question. It was a kid who had already done the math. Soren said it was nothing. Noah's expression said he was aware that this was not nothing, and was also willing to be patient about it. He didn't bring it up again until 2 days before, when he appeared in the doorway of Soren's room, while Soren was standing in front of his closet with the look of a man confronting a problem he hadn't anticipated and wasn't sure how to solve. He owned good clothes. He wore them to work. Somehow none of them seemed right for whatever this was, this thing he was refusing to call a date. Noah pushed past him and studied the closet for approximately 6 seconds. Then he pointed to the dark green jacket near the back, the one Soren had bought for his sister's wedding 3 years ago, and worn exactly twice. "That one," Noah said. "Why that one?" Soren asked. Noah said, "Because it makes you look like you tried, but not too much." The answer down landed with the certainty of someone who had thought about this a great deal and was simply sharing the conclusion. Soren put on the green jacket. Noah followed him to the hallway new to the hallway mirror and reached up to straighten the lapel with both hands, pressing it flat with the focus of someone doing something important. Then stepped back and tilted his head. "You should do something about your hair," he said. "My hair is fine," Soren said. "Your hair looks like you've been outside," Noah said. Soren fixed his hair. It was when he was putting on his shoes by the door that Noah disappeared into his room and came back with something held tight in his right hand. The way he held things he considered significant. He pushed it into the breast pocket of the green jacket before Soren could see what it was, and when Soren reached for it, Noah stepped back and held up one hand with the authority of a crossing guard. "Don't open it yet," he said. "Wait until it feels like the right time." And then, very seriously, like someone delivering a piece of intelligence that had cost something to gather, "If she seems nervous too, that's probably a good sign." I said it. Soren left, with the folded thing in his pocket and no idea what it was. His neighbor Ruth had come over to sit with Noah, as she did when Soren worked late, and she had given him a look on his way out, the door that asked everything, without saying a word. He gave her a look back that said he would tell her later. Noah walked him to the door the way he did. Every time Soren went anywhere, shoes lined up, arms around Soren's waist, chin up. There was something different in his face tonight, though, something that sat quietly behind his eyes, older than 8. "Don't be weird about it," Noah said, which was the most honest advice anyone had given him in years. Soren kissed the top of his head and left before he could think. Too hard about that. He sat in the parking lot of the restaurant for 11 minutes, with the engine running. No, not because he was afraid. Exactly. He had been afraid before. The real kind, the kind that restructured your entire understanding of the future. Future, in a single afternoon. And this was not that. But there was something adjacent to fear in his chest, something that had been quiet for so long he'd almost forgotten it was a feeling. And not just a fact about himself. He was 39 years old. He had a son who packed lunches with more nutritional awareness than most adults. Soren knew. He had a full life, a real one. It was undeniably, a contained one. He turned off the engine. He went inside. The restaurant was warm after the cold outside, the kind of warm that has its own quality, amber lighting, and the smell of something good on a wood fire. He was 4 minutes early. He found the host stand, gave Pete's name for the reservation, and was shown to a corner table he was grateful for without quite knowing why. He sat down. He checked his watch. That's 9 known. He was aware of the folded paper in his breast pocket, the way you're aware of something you're not supposed to touch yet. He was looking at the menu, without reading it, when he heard the door. She was moving the way people move when they've been running exactly on time and are aware of it. Not rushing, set but precise. Dark coat, one button undone at the top. A scarf she was still unwinding as she came through the door. Her hair was pulled back, but not quite fully. A few pieces catching the light as she turned toward the host. She had the look of someone who had made a decision to come here, and was in the process of not second-guessing it. She scanned the room. When her eyes found him, she stopped for just a moment. The scarf, held half in her hand, and then she crossed toward him, and he stood up the way his father had always stood up. Someone came to the table, which was not something he thought about. Just yes. And she said, "You must be Soren," he said. "You must be June." She sat down. He sat down. He'd set it down. There was the standard 30 seconds of menus and water, and the small rearrangement of things on the table that happens when two strangers are trying to figure out the shape of each other. Then June said, "How do you know, Pete?" Which was a good question, easy and real.
Patricians.
He set it down, and Soren told her about the renovation company he'd been running with Pete for the better part of a decade, and she laughed at something he said. About Pete's particular relationship with power tools, and the 30 seconds became 5 minutes, became something that didn't need to be measured. He learned she was an arborist. Worked mostly for the city, the parks department, some private contracts. He learned she drove a truck older than his, and was not apologetic about this. He learned she had grown up in a small town in northern Ontario, in the kind of place where the nearest grocery store was 40 minutes away, and everyone knew which families owned which dock. She learned. He had been a carpenter before the company, that he had built the breakfast nook in his kitchen himself, because Noah had asked for one, and he hadn't known how to say no to that specific request that he had recently become, through circumstances he described as educational, the reigning authority in his household on the care and upkeep of a leopard gecko named Appointment. Why Appointment? She said. Noah named him, Soren said. He named him Appointment because when he asked me if he could have a gecko, I told him we'd have to make an appointment. An appointment with the vet first to ask about it, and he thought I meant the gecko was called Appointment. June laughed, and it was the kind of laugh that wasn't performed, wasn't managed, just arrived. There was something he kept noticing across the table. Small things, the way she held the water glass with both hands when she wasn't drinking from it. Like she needed the weight of something solid, the way she looked at him directly when he was talking. Not the darting eye look of someone composing their response, but actual attention. She was either a very good listener, or she was the kind of person who was actually interested, and Soren had spent enough years in conversation with people to know the difference wasn't subtle. He asked how she'd ended up in the city. She said she'd moved for a job 8 years ago and stayed because it became home, which was not always the plan but was sometimes how it worked. She said it evenly, the way people see things that used to be complicated and have been handled enough to be simple now. He recognized the tone. He used it himself about certain things. He had not talked about Claire tonight. He had not planned to, and it hadn't come up. But somewhere between the main course and the moment the waiter appeared to ask about dessert, June said, "Pete told me you've been doing this alone for a while." She said it simply, not the tilted head way, not the tone of sympathy way. Just a fact on the table, available to discuss or leave. 6 years, Soren said. Dead. She nodded the way people nod when they're taking something seriously instead of performing concern. She didn't add to it. She didn't offer the standard responses, the "I'm sorry" and "I can't imagine" and the trailing silence. She just let it be what it was, and then said, "Noah sounds like an extraordinary kid." "He is," Soren said. "He doesn't know that yet, which I think is exactly right." She smiled. The waiter came. They both said no to dessert without checking with the other, and Soren noticed this, the way he'd been noticing small things all evening. He reached into his jacket pocket. He wasn't sure what made him do it exactly. The paper had been there all evening, a small weight he kept being aware of. He had Noah's instructions. Wait until it feels right, and it felt right now, in the quiet after the waiter left. In the particular quality of a conversation that has found its real footing. He unfolded it on the table. It was a drawing. Noah's drawings were always confident, always slightly outsized in ambition compared to his actual technical capacity, which Soren loved about them. This one was in marker, bold lines, 2 figures sitting across from each other at something that was clearly meant to be a table, a circle between them that was probably a plate, or a candle, or possibly a pizza. Noah was not always literal about these things. Both figures had round faces. Both were smiling, but shyly, the kind of smile that wasn't sure of itself yet. Below the drawing, in the large, careful lettering Noah used when he was concentrating on getting something right, 2 lines. "Be brave, Dad. She might be scared too." Soren sat with it for a moment. His throat had done something inconvenient. He pressed 2 fingers against the edge of the paper and breathed through it in the way he'd had a lot of practice doing. "He's 8, Soren said, which was not a complete sentence, but June seemed to understand what he meant by it. She looked at the drawing for a moment. She said, "He drew both of you with the same smile." She said it quietly, like she was saying something she wasn't sure she was supposed to say. Soren looked. She was right. He hadn't seen it that way. But she was right. Noah had given them the same expression, uncertain and trying. And he had put them at the same table. Fixane. He folded the drawing carefully along Noah's original creases. He put it back in his pocket. He looked at her across the table, and she was watching him with an expression that was not pity and not performance. Just steady. Just present. They walked out into the October cold at 9:20. The street had gone quieter since he'd arrived. Their breath showed briefly in front of them. Small clouds dissolving before they could become anything, something. He set it down. They stood on the sidewalk outside the restaurant, with the particular posture of two people at the end of something that has gone better than expected, which is its own kind of complicated. Soren knew this shape. He had built an extremely thorough relationship with it over 6 years. He was good at the ending. He set it down. He knew how to make it clean and mutual and complete. How to say the thing that closed the door politely from the outside. He had a son who was home with Ruth, and a routine that worked, and a life that was, by any reasonable accounting, a good one. He said, "Thank you, this was really nice." June said, "It was," and she meant it, which somehow made it harder. She started walking toward the parking structure at the end of the block. Soren turned toward the lot where he'd left his truck. He walked. Shoes on pavement, the sound of the city filling in around him, indifferent and ordinary. He counted without meaning to, 4 steps. 7, 10, 12. He stopped. He stood on the sidewalk with Noah's drawing in his jacket pocket and understood, clearly and without drama, exactly what he was doing. He had done this before. Not with June. He had never met June before tonight. But with the shape of this moment, the one where something real appeared in front of him. And he found the familiar path back to safety and took it. He was very good at the familiar path. They sat down. He had walked it enough times to know every stone. If he kept going, he would be home in 25 minutes. He would tell Ruth it went well, which it had. He would check on Noah, who would be asleep with one arm off the bed, the way he always slept. He would put the drawing on the counter and think about it for a few days, and then file it into the general category of things that were nice but not enough. He had a whole category like that. He had built it carefully. The footsteps ahead of him had gotten quieter. He turned around. June had gone maybe 30 feet. She was walking with her shoulders pulled in slightly against the cold, her scarf back in place now, her coat rebuttoned. She wasn't looking back. Soren said her name. Just that, one word. Her name in the cold air, ordinary and not ordinary at all. She stopped. She turned. He walked back toward her, not quickly. Just steadily, the way you walk when you've made a decision, and you're not going to let yourself unmake it in the 10 feet between where you are and where you need to be, he said. I wasn't going to do that, she said. I know. I could tell. He said, I'm out of practice, she said. I sat in my car before I came in for 14 minutes. I had a very reasonable argument going for why I should just go home instead, he said. What changed your mind? She looked at him for a moment. He sat down. She reached into her coat pocket and took out her phone, which surprised him, and then she turned it over and held it out toward him. On the back of the case, overlapping a small crack, in the bottom corner, there was a sticker. handmade, by the look of it. A small tree, green marker, slightly uneven, with a root system beneath it that was larger than the tree itself. The sticker was old, the edges lifting slightly. "My daughter made that," June said. "She's in Guelph now, university. She was 7 when she made it. She had this phase where she put her drawings on everything important to me. She said, 'Roots are what hold things up, even when you can't see them.'" He set it down. She took the phone back and looked at it for a second. I was sitting in my car arguing with myself, and I picked up my phone to check the time, and I looked at the sticker, and I thought. She stopped. She started again. She made that because she wanted to remind me of something. When I couldn't see it, I thought maybe tonight was a night I needed to remember it. Soren held that for a moment. Across the sidewalk, June was watching him with the same quality of attention she'd had all evening. Not asking for anything, not waiting for a particular kind of response. "Just there," he said. "I sat in the parking lot for 11 minutes before I came in." Something shifted in her expression, small, precise, like a small correction. She said, "We're both a little ridiculous," he said. "We're both something." They stood there on the sidewalk in the cold for another few minutes, and then he asked if he could call her. She said, yes. He said he would. She said she believed him, which was more generous than the previous 10 minutes had earned. He drove home with Noah's drawing on the passenger seat. Ruth gave him the look when he came through the door. He gave her the look back that meant later. She put on her coat and left him to it. The house was the particular quiet it got after Noah went to sleep. Not empty, nothing like empty, just holding its breath a little, still carrying the shape of the day in it. A pair of shoes kicked off near the couch. Appointments terrarium light on its timer. A dim orange glow from the living room. A drawing on the kitchen table, left unfinished, some kind of elaborate map with a legend that Soren couldn't fully decode. He turned off the kitchen light. He sat down on the floor in the hallway outside Noah's room. Back against the wall. Knees up, the way he'd sat on the floor in hospitals and waiting rooms, and in the particular silence of certain nights over the past 6 years, always in this approximate position, which was not comfortable, but was grounding in a way he'd never tried to explain to anyone. He took the drawing out of his pocket and unfolded it on his knee. Now, he looked at it for a long time, the two figures with their uncertain smiles, the table between them. "Be brave, Dad." She might be scared too. He thought about 14 minutes in a parking garage. He thought about a sticker on the back of a phone. Roots bigger than the tree. No aim. He thought about the 10 steps he'd taken in the wrong direction before he turned around, and the precise quality of the moment when a bad decision is still reversible, and you choose to reverse it. He was 39 years old. He had spent 6 years building something that worked, that was stable, and real, and good. And he had never once, not in any of those 6 years, asked himself whether working and good were the same as enough. It was not a comfortable question. He left it on the floor of the hallway where questions like that belonged, and let it sit there. He heard the particular small rustle from behind Noah's door. That meant Noah was awake, or had been awake, set it down, or was in one of the light sleep phases where he processed the day out loud, in a murmur that was almost intelligible. Then the creak of the bed, the soft thump of feet on the floor, and then the door opened 6 inches and Noah appeared in the gap. Hair sideways. The shark pajamas that were getting too short on him, squinting into the hallway light. He looked at Soren on the floor with the expression of someone who found this unsurprising. He came and sat beside him without being asked, leaning his weight into Soren's arm the way he'd done since he was small enough that it felt like nothing and now felt like something. Soren wrapped his arm around him. Noah looked at the drawing on Soren's knee. He looked at it for a moment. He said, "Did you open it at the right time?" "Yeah," Soren said. "I think so." Noah nodded, satisfied. He picked up the drawing, examined it with the objectivity of someone reviewing their own work, and set it back down. Then he said, "Was she scared too?" Soren looked at the drawing a little. He said, "Yeah." Noah considered this the way he considered information that confirmed something he'd already suspected. He was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "Did you call her?" "Not yet," Soren said. "I'm going to." Noah looked at the hallway wall. He said, "You should probably do that soon. You're not as good at waiting as you think you are." This was accurate. Soren didn't argue with it. Noah stayed beside him for a while longer, the solid, warm weight of him, and then he said he was going back to sleep, and went. Soren heard the creak of the bed, the small adjustments, and then quiet. He sat in the hallway for a few more minutes. Then he got up, put the drawing on the kitchen counter beside the unfinished map, turned off the terrarium light, and went to sleep. He called June the next morning, earlier than he'd planned, before Noah was up, and while the coffee was still in the first round. They talked for 35 minutes. 3 days after that, they talked for longer. He told Noah they'd talked, and Noah asked approximately 17 questions in rapid succession, and then said, "Good." The way you say good when something has confirmed a plan you've been running in the background for a while. He set it down. The first time the three of them were in the same place was a Saturday afternoon in November, a conservation area north of the city that June had suggested because she knew the trails from her work and thought Noah would like the beaver pond at the far end. Soren was more anxious, standing in the parking lot in Anchorage, waiting for her truck to pull in, than he had been at any point outside the restaurant, which surprised him. He'd cleared the restaurant. He'd turned around on the sidewalk. He'd made the calls. He'd thought he was past the worst of it. He was not past the worst of it. Noah was beside him in his red coat and his winter boots that were already slightly too small, which they'd been meaning to replace. He was not talking, which meant he was thinking. He was watching the lot. June's truck came in and parked 2 spaces down, that she got out with a backpack and a canvas tote. And the expression of someone who had decided to be exactly as she was and was committing to it. She wore a blue down vest over a flannel. She had her hair in a braid. She looked like someone who knew what to do in a forest, which she did. She and Soren exchanged a look that contained, without words, most of what the last few weeks of phone calls had covered. Then they both looked at Noah. Noah looked at June. He did not look away. He was conducting a thorough evaluation of her in the manner of someone who had standards and was not going to pretend otherwise. He started at her face, moved to the tote bag, which had a small embroidered mushroom on it, which he clocked with visible interest. Then back to the face. June did not crouch down to his level. She also did not speak first. She just stood with her backpack and her tote and let Noah finish his assessment. Noah said, "Hi." June said, "Hi." That was enough for the moment. They walked the trail. November had stripped the maples down to their architecture, the branches clean and legible against a white sky. The beaver pond was where June had said it would be. Noah had approximately 11 questions about the dam structure, which June answered with the particular pleasure of someone who actually knew the answers and was glad to be asked. Thorin watched this happen and said almost nothing, which was the right call. They found a big flat rock near the water's edge and sat on it. June took the sketchbook out of her pack, the spiral-bound kind. Soren hadn't known she kept one. She opened it and began drawing without commentary, the pencil moving quietly, her attention on the tree line across the water. Noah lasted about 2 minutes before he began migrating toward the sketchbook. He did it the way he did most things he was interested in, but hadn't claimed interest in, yet indirectly, incrementally, with pauses that were meant to appear casual. He ended up cross-legged on the rock about 2 feet from June, with his chin lowered to see the page, clearly not looking at the beaver pond anymore. June didn't look up. The pencil kept moving. On the page, shapes were emerging, bare trees, the line of the water, and then a smaller shape near the edge of the composition. A figure in a red coat, standing on a rock with winter boots and both hands in pockets, looking out at the pond. Noah went very still. June finished the figure and looked at it. She didn't say anything. She turned the sketchbook slightly in Noah's direction, not handing it to him, just making it available. She said, "That what you look like when you're thinking?" Noah stared at the drawing. The figure had his coat, his posture, the particular way he stood with his weight slightly on one heel. It was him, made in 10 minutes by someone who had been paying attention instead of just watching. He took the sketchbook. He held it with both hands and looked at it the way he looked. At things he took seriously, not performing interest, actually feeling it. Then he reached into his coat pocket and produced a small tin of colored pencils he carried. Everywhere, always, because he was Noah, and he was always prepared for the possibility of drawing. He chose a color, blue-gray, the specific gray-blue of the sky above them. And he added to the drawing, not to the figure of himself, but to the rock beside it. Second figure, slightly taller. Ptolemy, braid visible. Sketchbook in hand, sitting with one knee drawn up. He gave her the vest. He gave her the canvas tote propped against the rock. He worked slowly, with concentration, and when he was done, he held the sketchbook out from him to assess. Then he handed it to June. The 2 figures were side by side on the rock, one in pencil, one in blue-gray colored pencil. Different hands, different weight, but together on the same page. Thorin was looking at the beaver pond. The beaver pond. He was looking at the beaver pond because he needed somewhere neutral to look, and the beaver pond was there. June's voice when it came was quieter than usual. She said, "You put us on the same rock." Noah said, "That's where we both were." He said it like it was obvious, because to him it was. They stayed until the light went flat, and the cold settled in off the water with intention. On the path back, Noah walked between them, not touching either, but close. When the trail narrowed, he moved naturally toward June's side, and at some point, in the way that things happen when they've already become true, he took her free hand without asking. Thorin saw it happen from the corner of his eye and kept walking. At the trailhead, where the path opened. Back to the parking lot, Noah looked up at June. He said, "Are you going to come back?" It was not quite the question it sounded like. It was the question underneath that one, which was the real question, the one he'd been carrying since the night he'd put a drawing in his father's pocket and sent him out the door. June looked down at him. She took into his face, the serious eyes, the red coat, the boots that were getting too small. Something moved through her expression that was not easy to name. He said, "I'd like to, if that's okay with you." Noah thought about this for exactly as long as it took to decide it was already true. He nodded. Once. Son. Then he looked at the trees at the edge of the lot, where a crow was doing something complicated, and he went to investigate because that was the kind of thing Noah did when a conversation had reached its natural conclusion and there was still world left to look at. Soren and June stood at the trailhead and watched him go. He thought about 11 minutes in a parking lot, and 14 minutes, and 14 minutes in a parking garage, and two people who had almost talked themselves out of a thing before it began. He thought about a drawing in a breast pocket and a sticker on the back of a phone. He thought about the word enough and whether he had ever really examined it, or whether he had just used it the way you use a door to stop a room from being open. There was nothing he needed to say. The afternoon had said it better. Across the lot, Noah had reached the trees. He turned back toward them and called out with the urgency of someone who has found something worth sharing. "Come look at this," he called, "both of you." June was already moving. Soren followed, and the cold air came with them. And somewhere above the bare trees a crow lifted off and disappeared into the white November sky, and all three of them went to see what was worth seeing.